welcome to the next episode of C Programming. This episode is a short video. We're going to talk about the scanf function. Scanf function reads formatted data from the keyboard. So now we can interact with the user. Let's jump to the code. Okay, so I'll print to the screen and ask the user to enter a number. Please enter an integer. Semicolon. And now scanf. One thing to note, scanf function is inside stdio.h. So you remember when we said hash include stdio.h, we included a standard template library, and in the standard template library there are functions that we are going to use in our code. One of the functions were printf, and the other function here we're using is scanf. Scanf. Let's also create an integer and var 1, and we don't need to initialize it. So want scanf to read one number, but I need to tell it where to put it. So imagine you give a box of pizza to one of your friends and tell your friend to put it in your place. But your place, okay, makes sense, it's your house or your apartment, but your friend needs to know the address to go and put the pizza box in that address that you want. It's the same in C. If we want C to scan the input, we need to tell it where to put it. And not just our place, not just variable 1, I need to tell it the address. To tell the address to C, I'll say, so we wanted to put it on var1, but not just var1, in the address of the var1, and to point to the address of the var1, I'll add a reference character here with %. So %, is the reference character. I know I'm using two weird statements. One pointing to and the reference. These two are the fundamentals of C. We will have dedicated videos to them, how they work and how to deal with them. But please hear me out right now. By putting % before a variable, we are telling C that this is the address. Control F5 to compile and run the code. We get an error. The error says, scanf, this function or variable may be unsafe, consider using a scanf s instead. Some compilers are considering scanf a problem because there are some issues with its definition as standard template library. Some compilers, probably the new ones, only allow scanf.s. So if you face that error, here's the fix. Scanf_s and then parentheses %d var1. But I wanted to make sure that I have scanned the correct thing. Print f, the number you entered is %d. Let's compile and run this code to see what's happening. The command prompt asks me to enter a number, and I'll enter 12, for example. And the number you have entered is a weird number. Let's go back to the code and see what's the problem. So I set %d here, but I didn't specify the argument. These are the possible mistakes that can happen during writing your C code. So I have to tell it what to print, which is var1. Control F5 again, I'll enter 12 again, press enter, the number you entered is 12. As you might have guessed, the scanf function is similar to printf function. It can read any data, char, integer, string, whatever you want. Let's try it with a float number, for example. Float var1, I have to change this to %f and %, so to know the address of var1, and here I have to change it to %f as well. Control F5 to compile and run the code, 1.3 for example, and I have entered 1.3. Of course you can modify the formatted for output, number of decimal points, number of spaces, but let's keep this as default for now. Also, we can do that with character and string, as you know, but let's try something else. Let's take two integers from the input and add them together. So integer var1, integer var2. By the way, this is a way to introduce two integer. Another way is to say int var1 comma var2. It's exactly the same code. So please enter two integers. So instead of just scanning a %d, I can scan 2% d with a space between. And the first one will go to the address of var1, the second one will go to the address of var2. We can print the summation of them. Summation of the numbers you entered is the summation of the numbers you entered is, and I can add them directly here, var1 and var2. And be careful that it's an integer, not a float. Okay, compile and run the code. I will add 12 and 17 and press enter. The summation of the numbers you entered is 29, which is correct. You might have noticed that I haven't entered /n on the first printf, but still there is the second printf goes to the next line. The reason is when we enter the numbers for a scanf, for example, I put 12, then a space 17, then hit enter. That hit enter actually is a /n code, so it automatically goes to the next line. If you want to leave another line empty, you can add a /n to the beginning of the next statement. Let me show you actually. So if I add a /n here, I will have an empty line between the printf statement and the first printf statement and the second printf statement. Control F5 to compile and run without debugging. And I add 12 and 19 this time. And you see there's a line between the first printf statement and the second printf statement. The summation of the numbers you entered is 31, which is correct. I can also read an integer and a float number, for example, at the same time. Let's create var1 as integer and float var2. Definitely semicolon. So the first one is the integer, second one is the float. Please enter one integer and one float number. And I'm reading it like this, and I'm printing them one by one. The integer number is %d, and the float number is %f. And var1 for the integer and var2 for printing the float number. So if I compile and run this code, so integer I will put 12, 1.6 for the float number. And if I hit enter, the integer number is 12 and the float number is 1.6. So the key points to have in mind when using scanf function is to have the format the same that your user wanted to input the numbers. In this case, we had an integer space float number. So I had %d space %f. And you need to remember that we always want scanf to write these in the address of the variables. To point to the address of the variables, just add an ampersand before the variable name. For example, in this case, the integer will go to var1, so for the first argument after the formatted part is ampersand var1, and the second argument is ampersand var2. So don't forget that the arguments need to be addresses, not the actual variable. So this concludes our video on scanf function. I recommend go ahead, write your own code to take two float numbers, multiply them by each other, and returns the results. Let me know if you had any questions. Have a great one. See you in the next video.